Yes, please, Akhil. You can start the session.
Good evening and a warm welcome to Expert Talk series. My name is Akhil Rashid. I will introduce the Expert Talk series session and the speaker. Jammu and Kashmir Policy Institute has initiated the Expert Talk series to engage experts, changemakers, pioneers from various walks of life to understand the dynamic context of implementing the UN Sustainable Development Goals on its agenda. Expert Talk series is a special initiative where we seek to source inputs and recommendations from experts in various fields pertaining to different sustainable development goals through one-on-one dialogues. We have successfully concluded 25 sessions so far. Today's session is a part of the Expert Talk series on SDG 4, quality education. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Dr. Monisa Qadri, who is a media educator and teaches at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Islamic University of Science and Technology, Avantipora. And she has been its former head as well. She also holds the position of university's first media advisor to Vice Chancellor and heads university's PR and Media Center. She has been a Copenhagen Fellow, Florida International University in 2021, Bridge Institute, UK Kalinga Fellow in 2021 and 2017, Commonwealth Professional Fellow, United Kingdom in 2019, and Indo Global Social Sciences Media Fellow in 2012-2013. We believe her vast knowledge and experience in this domain would be highly beneficial for all the attendees and would add great value to the event. On behalf of the entire team of JKPI, I welcome you, ma'am. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. Now, I would like to pass on the mantle to Tanveer. He will facilitate the session. Thank you.
Very good evening to everyone. Thank you, Akhil. Thank you so much for the introduction of Expert Talk series and Expert for our tonight's Expert Talk session. So first of all, as we are discussing importance of media literacy education, this has been our second session on this topic. Like in the first session, we had Dr. Tabina with us, and today we have one more expert, Dr. Monisa Qadri with us. So ma'am, let's jump straight to the question. My first question to you is, what is media literacy education and why does it matter?
First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me today, and Assalamu alaikum to everyone and part of the panel and everyone who's watching us. I think media literacy is a very significant area to deliberate upon when we look at where we are existing today and how do we situate ourselves as contemporary citizens. As they say, media literacy is more about a skill set. It's an essential skill set that kind of better equips us with an appropriate set of skills for engaging with media. We engage with media on daily basis as individuals, as professionals, in our personal sphere, in our professional sphere. So why not do it in a more meaningful manner and a more informed way? So that's why media literacy becomes really important. And a textbook definition about media literacy talks about the potential or the capacity to analyze media, to access media. And now when we look at access, first knowing which sort of media needs to be accessed. For example, it's a very usual practice for us to kind of expose children to, let's say, rhymes at a very young age. So that becomes the point of access for them to a particular media content. And we must also be aware that exposing children below a certain age to, let's say, the giant social media platform that is used for video and video and music sharing currently, should they be exposed to that platform or the kids version of the same platform? So this is the stage of access. So making the right kind of decision in terms of which platform you should be accessing. Or even, for example, if you talk about news in today's world, so is a news website the right kind of an appropriate medium for accessing news, or should we follow what is what we receive in the form of social media forwards, or let's say of WhatsApp forward, and start believing in whatever content is being shared? So there the media literacy comes into play, knowing what sort of a media format needs to be accessed, and making the right kind of decision in terms of how you consume that media. Not every media content that we come across needs to be believed, needs to be needs to be seen as an accurate piece of message. So those critical skills that we have in terms of evaluating a particular media content would be realized through media literacy. So and then when you are aware of which content we need to access, and then how to go about using that particular form of media, then we can make informed decisions in terms of media production. When you're aware of how media content is produced, like what is the process of news gathering, and how does a reporter research for a story, and how important it is for them to have a balance in story, balance in terms of asking the relevant people questions who are connected with the story, and making sure that you pitch in every side of the story. So if you as an audience member, if you as an individual are aware of these many domains, we can better produce content. You see, there's plethora of content that's not produced by professional graduates or those who've been to journalism schools. We have people who are media literates but are not from journalism background, but they are producing content with the talk about social media platform, or when you talk about social media influencers for that matter, or as they call them, citizen journalists. So not everyone is doing it in a professional manner, but some sort of understanding is there, some sort of literacy is there. So reading and writing about media content would determine the kind of media literates that you are. I think the second part of your question was, how does it matter? I did answer that a bit. And then if you look at the national education policy of 2020, that really stresses on the skill development of students and individuals. It really focuses on how the curriculum should focus on areas of capacity building, for example. And media literacy is one significant area of skill development, which needs to be incorporated, not just in terms of individual courses related to media education, but also needs to be incorporated in other spheres of education. And right now, if you look at, the kind of we are in the process of reimagining this entire education sector in the backdrop of this particular policy. So I think, again, media literacy becomes really, really important. And then look at the media landscape that we are living in today's world. Even in a place like Kashmir, for example, the spectrum of information and communication technologies that we encounter on daily basis, in our everyday lives, that is, we are not well versed with all of those technologies. And that well versedness or that know-how would only come in when you're formalizing media literacy in the education domain, which has not been there. It has not really been given that much of an importance. We do talk about digital literacy and other formats of education, but media per se is not really been a significant area of focus for our educational institutes also. So there's a gap. If you look at the school education, the curriculum that is taught there, at times even complaints are there regarding the higher educational institutes, wherein they say that, there is a gap between the industry and the curriculum that is taught in higher education institutes. Even though we try, to engage or have that interface with the industry, but still that gap remains, and it's more so in college and school. So, right from the primary education, right from, as they have used this new term, preparatory phase in education, it starts from there only, and that's where you need to focus more about creating these literate individuals who are able to engage with technologies and able to engage with media in a much informed and a much professional manner than probably the generations before them were.
थैंक यू मैम, वेरी वेल सेड. आपने बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स रेज किए. जैसे आपने एक पॉइंट कहा कि जो छोटे बच्चों को हम फोन हाथ में देते हैं राइम्स देखने के लिए एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा, सो फिर यूट्यूब पे तो पता ही आपको कि मतलब यू वोंट गेट दैट कंटेंट ओनली जो बच्चे देखना चाहते हैं. सो इट्स मिक्स्ड अप विद अ लॉट ऑफ कंटेंट. सो आल्सो आपने बात की स्कूल कैरिकुलम की, सो विल टॉक ऑन दिस पॉइंट इन आवर सेकंड क्वेश्चन. So, ma'am, let's directly jump to the second question. It's about this media education in classroom. So, tell us about the importance of teaching media literacy education in the classroom.
Sorry, I think classroom एक ऐसा space होता है, it's an ecosystem which really impacts the mind of an individual in a more meaningful manner जितना हम उसको importance देते रहे हैं आज तक. एंड जो पेडागॉजी है, जो टीचिंग की जो पेडागॉजी है, उस पे एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट स्ट्रेस होना चाहिए. यू नो व्हाई वी हैव बीन फेलिंग ऑन अ लॉट ऑफ फ्रंट्स व्हेन इट कम्स टू एजुकेशन, और यू नो द modules that we teach, at times the syllabus might be really nice but the pedagogy is somewhere where we fail. So Nordic countries की अगर आप example ले ले, why are they still so much ahead of us? Because their designing of curriculum along with pedagogy has incorporated all these points जो अब हम आज बात कर रहे हैं जिन चीजों पे, या जैसे मैंने नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी की बात की. अगर आप क्लासरूम की बात करें फर्दर, एक this policy calls for an extensive synergy in curriculum right from the the level of education जो एक early childhood में आता है up till higher education. फिर higher education में आप research की बात करें या masters level की बात करें. और एक बहुत major focus, if you look at the kind of governance model that we have in place, or even the policies that are following the governance, and the focus on citizen-centric communication is higher now. It's greater. अब जब आप citizen-centric communication की बात करेंगे तो आप उन media channels की भी बात करेंगे, उन media genres की भी बात करेंगे which are consumed by citizens, which they follow. जैसे मैंने access की बात की. Not every part of the population, not every region will understand the same language. So all these factors do come into play. So it does stress the citizen-centric communication focuses on various platforms which are consumed. Why do you see governments engaging with citizens using all sorts of media? Why do you see people being very active on Twitter, people being very, significantly prominent with technologies like television, for example, or news? That's because they've understood the need to access their citizens through these channels and platforms, and as they say, leverage the usage and impact of these technologies. So जब आप इस सब की बात करेंगे, then you will understand the dynamic that has been created by the pandemic situation. And during the pandemic, what has happened is that all these technologies, all these media formats have somehow become really significant. But at the same time, we are struggling with issues of fake news, for example, या disinformation. So उस सब को भी आपने देखना है at the same time while you are engaging with citizens or while you're engaging with population through communication. And then it goes back to the classroom. Classroom is where you begin. Classroom is where you update. Classroom is where you teach a certain skill, wherein students imbibe certain skills to better engage with media. And मैंने एक बात की थी पहले, वो ये था कि हम सिर्फ मीडिया एजुकेशन के सेपरेट कोर्सेज की नहीं बात करें, हम बात कर रहे हैं आप मीडिया रिसोर्सेज को बाकी सारे जो आपके मॉड्यूल्स हैं, कोर्सेज हैं, उसमें कैसे इनकॉर्पोरेट कर रहे हैं. और वो जो होगा वो होगा बाय मेकिंग यूज ऑफ लेट्स से फिल्म्स, लेट्स से डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज, vividly making use of those resources which are available, and explaining concepts through through that content which is available. बहुत content available है all around us, but we are not making use of that effectively. So classroom में आप ये सब कर सकते हैं. And when you are, for example, अब आप you introduce a student to, let's say, let's talk about the COVID situation. We saw that during COVID, there were certain labeling, or there was social profiling of a community with regards to their participation, with regards to the infection that had spread. And when you analyze that news and you will look at certain ideologies are thrown up, आप आराम से उनको identify कर सकते हैं. You can talk about how the production of news is taking place, and the students will definitely by themselves create those analytical ability. अब जब ये analytical ability question करने की, analyze करने की, examine करने की चीजों को या evaluate करने की, ये जब develop हो रही है students में, वो better citizens हो सकते हैं कल को. वो consume नहीं करेंगे कोई भी disinformation as news. They would try and verify that news and go to the right source of information. They might come across 5 different sources of information, but evaluate and analyze them and reach to the right source of information. So ये चीजें practice के through हो सकती हैं through your classroom. And if you look at even then, audiences, they say, media literacy का एक principle ये है कि आप एक तो analyze करें content को, you will look at where it's coming from, how is it being created, and how are you interpreting that content. Media reading, जिसे हम कहते हैं, how you read a particular text. Text could be a film, text could be a photograph, text could be a cartoon. You see so many memes being created, digitization of humor in the form of digital memes, and memes have become a big source of entertainment in digital era. And जब आप उन मीम्स को एनालाइज करेंगे, उनका प्रोडक्शन देखेंगे, आप देख सकते हैं who could be the source of these memes. You will be able to identify where this could have come from and what are the different ideologies behind that. Because see, media at the end of the day, whatever messages we consume, they're all constructs. They construct a certain event, they construct a certain incident that has taken place, or कंस्ट्रक्ट कौन कर रहा है? एक इंडिविजुअल, एक ह्यूमन बीइंग जो कि फुल है बायसेस के साथ, जिसके अपने बायसेस हैं, जिसके प्रेजुडिसेस हो सकते हैं. एंड दैट प्रोसेस ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्शन इज एम्बेडेड विद दोज बायसेस एट टाइम्स. Yes, the degree may be higher or less, but the biases would be there. We really can't get rid of our biases completely. So when you're aware as a student, when you're aware as an audience member, you would critically be able to look at the production process also. And then as audience member also, we understand that we also follow the same way of looking at things. We also have our ideologies. We also have our social constructs of, issues around us. We also look at things from a certain prism. हम चीजों को अपने हिसाब से देखते हैं. कोई एक लेंस लगा के देखते हैं. It may be based on your gender. It may be based on the region that you belong to. It may be based on the level of education that you've had. It may be based on the kind of exposure you have to media content, let's say. Or it may be also based on the faith that you represent. So all of these factors will also come into play when you are negotiating the meaning as an audience member. So I, as an audience member, when I'm aware of the bias on the other side of the story, I am quite aware of the bias that I hold as an audience member while consuming a particular content. So वो चीज भी मैं reflect कर सकती हूँ by the choice of content that I make. For example, at times students ask me कि ma'am, which book to read or which program or which documentary should they watch? And if I tell them no, watch this or read this book, so I'm imposing my perception of what's right or what's quality upon those youngsters as individuals. So it's their choice which will evolve as a process of going through multiple content varieties that they're able to encounter, and then coming up with a decision wherein you're able to evaluate it, wherein you're able to reject some content, wherein you're able to negotiate with some parts of a content, or wherein you're able to accept a particular content fully. Like, for example, weather news. they'll say it will be snowing, and it snows. So you accept that fully as a reality, and that's the dominant meaning that they wanted to create. They wanted you to believe it in fully, and you do so. So as an audience member, when you negotiate with meaning, it kind of gives you a higher pedestal as an individual, and you sort of आपको एक अपने ऊपर थोड़ी सी वो responsibility लेते हैं that my decisions or my choice has to be slightly rational, because now it's coming from a state of being a media literate person. So classroom में जब ये सारी practices हो रही हैं, when you are engaging with news and you're analyzing and you're being allowed to question also at the same time, so analytical ability is also getting developed. Normally, some of the thinkers and philosophers have often questioned the traditional education and classroom, and they say that classroom में group think पे ज़्यादा focus होता है. They believe in creating conformists, but when you have a situation like this, probably there would be a way to have some sort of freedom of expression. And then go back to the Constitution. The Article 19(1)(a) of Constitution talks about freedom of expression, and it does talk about it kind of awards the citizens with the right to express themselves, their views through different sort of media. And एक्चुअली उस मीडिया में आपके डिजिटल मीडिया भी आ रहे हैं, आपके सोशल मीडिया भी आ रहे हैं, आपके जो लेगेसी मीडिया है वो फॉर्मेट्स भी आ रहे हैं. जब वो सारे प्लेटफॉर्म्स आपके पास अवेलेबल हैं अपने आप को एक्सप्रेस करने के लिए, सो हम क्यों ना बेटर इक्विप्ड जाएं उन चीजों पे एक्सप्रेस करने के लिए. एक सिंपल चीज हो सकती है semantics, knowing the right kind of semantics that should be used. Why does it only have to be a very sophisticated level of understanding and literacy? It can come down to simple grammar and simple language that you could use while engaging with the audiences around you. Or even the language. National education policy places a major thrust on foreign languages, on different languages. So respecting that ecosystem and cross-cultural communication will also be slightly strengthened more because of the media literacy that would be taking place in classroom, for example.
बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशन आपने शेयर की मैम. तो आपने फेक न्यूज की बात की, प्लस आपने एक इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट बोला, एनालाइजिंग द कंटेंट बिफोर यू फाइनलाइज व्हाटएवर हैज बीन शेयर्ड ऑन द सोशल मीडिया. तो उससे पहले एनालाइज करना कि ये चैनल की ऑथेंटिसिटी और व्हाटएवर. फेक न्यूज की बात आपने जैसे की, तो recently a survey conducted by National Crime Records Bureau in September 2021. So the survey showed that there has been an increase of 214% in the spread of rumors and fake news in the last 4 years, 17 to 21. And India has been the largest source of misinformation and rumors on COVID-19. So, and in this period, social media has accounted for 85% of the total fake news or rumors that have been shared on the internet. So India has been followed up by Brazil and USA with 9 and 8.6% respectively. So the authenticity की बात हम करें तो फिर से it's very important to analyze the content before you go to the final readings. So before we jump to another question, we have one question popping up on Facebook. Just one second. So it's Javed asking, we have seen over the years people become victims of false news. What are the conditions that would make a false news story more credible? How to counter it?
Okay, should I take this question?
Yes.
अब एक तो ये जो false news है और आपने कहा न्यूज या जर्नलिज्म, ये दोनों मेरे ख्याल से एक साथ फिट नहीं बैठते. क्योंकि अगर हम जाएं एज अ स्टूडेंट ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन, एज अ स्टूडेंट ऑफ मीडिया, one of the first things that we are taught is upholding accuracy in news, for that matter. I'm not claiming that the entire mediascape, entire journalistic scenario is accurate, and जो भी हमारे पास न्यूज आती है वो सब फैक्चुअल है, करेक्ट है, ऑब्जेक्टिव है, उस पर हम बाद में बात कर सकते हैं. लेकिन the facts should have been at the core of journalism, at least. If not at the core of, for example, filmmaking है, उसमें अगर आप factual fallacy थोड़ा सा आप experience करें चल जाएगा, but not in case of news stories. So if you see that you're struggling with finding facts in a news story, it really does not hold true to be a piece of journalism, per se. So it is there, and fact checking जो है वो एक एसेंस है जर्नलिज्म प्रोसेस का. जब भी एक जर्नलिस्ट जाता है कोई स्टोरी करने, राइट फ्रॉम द टाइम व्हेन अ पर्टिकुलर पर्सन इज असाइंड अ स्टोरी कि आप जाके इस चीज पर रिपोर्ट करें, या वो खुद एक डिसीजन लेता है दैट दिस पर्टिकुलर इवेंट इज वर्थ रिपोर्टिंग, ये न्यूज बनने के लायक है, वो एक डिसीजन ही बेस्ड होता है इस अंडरस्टैंडिंग पे कि ये एक फैक्चुअल इंसिडेंट है एंड इट हैज दैट न्यूज वर्दीनेस. It can it is something that people would be interested in knowing about, and the fact that there are different aspects to this story make it more significant for people to know. And at the end of the day, see, we are all entitled to have our own opinions, but we are not entitled to have our version of reality or our version of facts or truth. Truth ek hi hai, there's only one version of the reality. Not every story will cover a particular incident in its holistic manner. You will see that some news stories would be in great detail and they'll be elaborate. They'll be in the form of long features, and they'll be looking at different dimensions of a particular news that has taken place. And some stories would be, a shorter version of that report. But facts के साथ कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं होना चाहिए, देन इट्स नॉट जर्नलिज्म. एंड जो फैक्ट चेकिंग की बात है या चेकिंग द ऑथेंटिसिटी ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर स्टोरी, और एज यू सेड द वर्ड क्रेडिबिलिटी, इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. एंड अगर हम आजकल के दौर में देखें तो काफी सारे टूल्स अवेलेबल हैं फॉर फैक्ट चेकिंग. काफी सारे प्रोफेशनल्स और एक्सपर्ट्स हैं जो कि ये सब काम करते हैं. देयर आर सम ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस आल्सो व्हिच आर मीडिया ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हु हैव they have kept fact checking tools available for the audiences to verify whether a particular news is correct or not. And then you have certain websites or you have certain tools which are available जहां पे आप ट्रेस कर सकते हैं, जैसे गूगल के पास भी है. सो आप ट्रेस करते हैं, अगर कोई फोटोग्राफ एक स्टोरी के साथ अवेलेबल है, जैसे आपने कोविड की बात की. कोविड हैज बीन कॉल्ड इंफोडेमिक एंड राइटली सो बिकॉज ऑफ द अमाउंट ऑफ disinformation that has taken place during COVID phase. उस दौरान अगर आप देखेंगे काफी सारे ऐसे फोटोग्राफ्स स्टोरीज के साथ या सोशल मीडिया पे सर्कुलेट हुए which really they were not accurate, they were not correct. वो falsely use किए गए to signify something जो कि मे बी पुराना एक इंसिडेंट था, कई साल पुराना, एंड उसको किसी चीज को लेबल करने के लिए या एक कम्युनिटी को मलाइन करने के लिए या एक रॉन्ग रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ एन इवेंट, उस चीज के लिए उन्होंने वो फोटोग्राफ का इस्तेमाल किया. लेकिन अब आप वो सोर्स भी ट्रेस कर सकते हैं. सो द टूल्स आर अवेलेबल. एंड देन again, it's not just the responsibility of an audience member, but also the responsibility as a society as well, of journalism schools, of the legacy media, because the amount of fake news luckily on newspapers is still way less than you see on the current unconventional formats that are available. शायद यही रीजन है कि आप अभी भी जब आपने कोई न्यूज वेरीफाई करनी है और आपने एक्यूरेसी देखनी है, you'll go back to a newspaper and you'll check their website and see whether they have reported or not. Otherwise you get a lot of information on daily basis on your social media platforms, but whether that is to be consumed or not, that is for you to decide, that is for you to question. One of the things that we generally say in our field is that you need to doubt everything. So you necessarily don't have to take news story as a piece of fact all the time. It can have some sort of fiction being played around, and we have seen, if you look at the television industry, television news channels in particular. So जो पोस्ट ट्रूथ एरा में हम रह रहे हैं आजकल के दौर में, जो आप एक स्ट्रेस देखेंगे इमोशनल आउटबर्स्ट पे और एक रिफ्लेक्शन होगा अबाउट इमोशंस. आप एक इंसिडेंट को देखते हैं नॉट वाया फैक्ट्स एंड लॉजिक, बट आप उसको देखते हैं अपने इमोशंस एंड आइडियोलॉजी के तौर पे. सो जब आप इस दौर में रह रहे हैं तो आप देख सकते हैं इवन टेलीविजन न्यूज एट टाइम्स इट अपीयर्स बायस्ड ऑन फेस वैल्यू इटसेल्फ. आपने और ज्यादा डीपर एनालिसिस भी नहीं करना होता. सो थोड़ी सी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी हमारे तौर पे भी है एज इंडिविजुअल्स. एंड again, the idea of detection then about this fake news, it also kind of gets embedded when you have a significant know of how to use these tools, or how to kind of how does the media process take place, and which are the relevant sources that should be used. There are some platforms that are available जिनका काम ही ये है कि वो आपके जो mainstream media houses है उनके stories लेके वो आपको बताते हैं whether that's correct or not. There are some media houses which are there and you can follow them. They have a great audience following as well. You can look for them. And so what they do is that they'll trace the origin of that particular story or that photograph or that comment that has been made, and they'll tell you ki ya sach suppose ya ye accurate hai. So they'll do that for you. But for us, it is important that we are aware at least. हम पहले ये मान के चलें कि न्यूज़ भी गलत हो सकती है. And as I said earlier, all this production process, all this construction of reality takes place through individuals, and individuals, as I said earlier, are subject to biases, are subject to their own opinions at times. And there are again there are commercial interests that are involved in businesses like media houses. These big huge media conglomerates, they are there because it's a successful model for business, and they're not doing a charity when they are reflecting about a particular issue. So जब आप ये मान के चलेंगे कि ये भी एक बिजनेस हाउस है, ये इनका भी एक रेवेन्यू जनरेशन का प्रोसेस होगा, तो आप शायद थोड़ी सी जिम्मेदारी अपने तौर पे भी एक्सेप्ट करेंगे, and you'll follow the process of engaging with that particular content in a more responsible manner.
थैंक यू मैम. फैक्ट चेकिंग की आपने बात की, तो इंडिया में जैसे वी हैव प्रेस इंफॉर्मेशन ब्यूरो, वो भी आप फैक्ट चेकिंग करते हैं, एंड वी हैव दिस factchecker.in, एंड देयर इज वन मोर सोर्स फॉर फैक्ट चेकिंग, ऑल्ट न्यूज़, जो बहुत ज्यादा काम कर रहे हैं फेक न्यूज़ पे, है ना, ये फैक्ट चेकिंग पे. So let's jump back to the basics. So we have a question, what are the fundamentals of the media literacy education?
Okay. Jesse, I talked about earlier, if you look at the process of, if you look at the definition of media literacy, what does it say? It says it's a simple ability है एक individual की कि वो कैसे access करे मीडिया को, वो कैसे उसका इस्तेमाल करे, वो कैसे उसको consume करे, वो कैसे उसको analyze करे, so that they can create something out of their understanding about media. And as I mentioned earlier, first knowing which media or which media content needs to be accessed, that is really important. And how it works is that at times we get limited by the the channels that are provided to us, or the kind of media that is available to us, maybe in terms of regulation, maybe in terms of some sort of censorship happening at some level, or yeah, maybe because of the economic factors, so wo hum limit kar lete hain. So shayad wo bhi ek reason banta hai ki we are not able to access across the board, media across the board. So knowing exactly how to access the right kind of media for what kind of information that you're using, that is important. And then if you look at this construction of reality or construction of meaning on part of the audience members, it is based on the connotative as well as denotative process. आप जब एक टेक्स्ट पढ़ते हैं उसका एक denotative meaning है. For example, the color green, it means something. It is a color, and you can very well, you can have a literal meaning of this color. And then there is a connotative meaning. There's a cultural understanding of how this color reflects in your mind. Why would there be resistance towards, let's say, coloring a public place in one of the cities in mainland India? It might not be acceptable, or another color that might not be acceptable, because there is a cultural significance or a cultural value that is attached to it. एक cultural construct है, आप देख सकते हैं, जो कि political ideology पे based होता है, जो कि आपकी religious ideology भी reflect करता है, जो कि आपका gender भी कई बार reflect करता है. let's say black versus pink, for example. So even जब आप छोटी सी चीज color जो कि as such per se आपको surface value पे आपको ये bias नहीं लगेगा, but then they also have a lot of laden meanings along with that. So every text has a subtext, as has an underlying meaning that needs to be read. You might have come across this one-liner which says reading between the lines. So you kind of tend to read between the lines more so when you are able to analyze things in a better manner. So this analysis and appreciation of media is also a fundamental of media literacy. As I said earlier, when you are able to access and consume different sort of content, you're able to appreciate it on different values. For example, technicalities. आप एक production की जब बात करते हैं, आप media aesthetics की बात करते हैं, उसमें aesthetics में आपका sound design है, आपका light का technical aspect hai. So there's light, there's there's dark, there's light in a particular frame. What meaning do they construct? Why is, for example, if you watch a film Padmavat, for example, there's a certain aesthetics that come along with the character of Khilji. There's this dark ambience around him and the way he's dressed, way he eats, way he engages with people. There's a certain persona that they reflect. But on the other side of the story is quite lit up. It has colors, it has some exuberance of life and positivity to it. So as a director, I choose to, as a writer of a particular text, or as a journalist, I choose to show a particular scenario in a manner how I feel it should be depicted. या मुझे पता है जैसे मैं इसको perceive कर रहा हूँ या जैसे मैं इसको represent कर रहा हूँ, ये वैसा ही meaning create करेगा in the minds of audiences. So this is also a fundamental principle that needs to be understood. कि consequences होते हैं. There are social consequences of media content and the reading that you have about this particular content. And as content creators, as I mentioned, the influencers earlier on, you see the kind of content that at times gets supplied or created may not be following the rules of the traditional media production policy at times. There is a conflict. वो conflict तभी होता है because there's lack of media literacy at some level. And then if you look at the commercial aspect, as I said earlier on, even a platform like YouTube or social media platform, there's an aspect of monetization. So अगर आपको एक इंसान review करके दे रहा है एक, let's say, a phone, you're watching a phone review for buying a particular phone, and that particular person, that blogger or that YouTuber has been reviewing different technology, different gadgets and different technologies for you to follow, and you believe that whatever he's saying or she's saying is coming from an expert's mind. But then at times what happens is that they do paid partnerships also. They work in consonance with some interests around, so you can't really follow them as accurate truth. Then also यहाँ पे न्यूज का दखल नहीं है, यहाँ पे हिस्ट्री की बात नहीं हो रही, यहाँ पे एक सिंपल रिव्यू की बात हो रही है. सो वो रिव्यू भी कितना फैक्चुअल है, वो भी आप क्रॉस चेक कर सकते हैं by visiting multiple sources. So what I'm saying is that don't just limit yourself to a particular form or a particular genre only. Go about accessing multiple and diverse sources. आप अगर एक साइड ऑफ द स्टोरी देख रहे हैं, अगर हम न्यूज की बात करें, अगर आप एक साइड ऑफ द स्टोरी देख रहे हैं ऑन लेट्स से वन ऑफ द मेन न्यूज चैनल्स व्हिच इज इन इंग्लिश, you can check other regional networks also, you can check other language channels also. There's no harm in following the content and seeing ki where do they vary. There would be shades of variance in the version of the reality that they are showing. Where does that come from? कहाँ पे वो variation है? वो आप तब identify करेंगे जब आप तैयार होंगे to access and open up to different sort of content around you. Yeah.
बहुत important point मैम आपने कहा, जो accessing multiple handles to check if there is any variance. So ma'am, we have only 1 hour session, so we won't let you take more rest. We'll ask you more and more questions. So I have my colleague Ulvi who wants to ask a question. Ulvi, please, if you're there.
Yes, ma'am. I actually have a question, ma'am. Since at the beginning you talked about how we as an individual view narratives through different lenses. So how do we go about trying to solve out the information crisis, which is among the youth as well as the elders there, so that they do not fall prey to the Eurocentric propaganda, which is so dominant in the scenario in and of itself?
आपने यूरोसेंट्रिक की बात किया. एक तो पहले कि accepting that something like this happens. For example, there's a presence of propaganda in content, and it can happen at every level. It can happen at our most trusted sources as well. And how that can be countered, or how that can be sort of minimized, is by being media literates, by engaging with more and more content, by reading more, by looking at resources which are slightly credible right now, or which have been able to create that sense of credibility over a period of time. For example, अब journalism की बात की करेंगे या एक मीडिया हाउस की बात करेंगे. So every new story they do helps them establish that credibility once again. It's not the case कि आपने एक story किया या आपने एक piece of incident report किया and you're done forever. आपका credibility establish हो गया. Now you're authentic forever. No, it doesn't happen that way. Every new story, every word they write, it will help them establish their credibility once again. And also the fact that intertextuality, why just go about following news only on a particular incident? Why not look for other sources, like a book that has been written on it, or a blog that's coming from maybe somebody who's very close, a source somebody who's close to that situation or that location, maybe a source like that, or a book, or a video story that has been done by a citizen who is just sharing a piece of information on internet. So when you will have these multiple sources available, you'll be able to verify how much close a particular news story, or how much close a particular piece of information is to reality. And then the responsibility and the onus lies on us as individuals and as audiences. If we close our eyes to reality, and if we accept whatever they are doing, it's their job, it's the job of a journalist, it's their job to verify the story. Yes, it is their job, because that's the essence of journalism, verifying the story and presenting the factual piece of information about an incident. But then that does not really undermine the kind of responsibility that we have as audience members. The role of verifying also exists at our level. And now we are lucky, we live in times wherein जहाँ पे आपके पास बहुत सारे टूल्स अवेलेबल हैं, जहां पे आप इंटरनेट में बहुत ज्यादा you can make use of internet and check the authenticity of any piece of information. So, but how many times do we do that? Every time you see a story that's sensational, or that's interesting, or that's going to give us more likes or more followers or more comments on our social media platforms, we post it without even verifying. And then what happens is that somebody will tell you that this was a fake story, or this isn't correct, या इसमें एक informational fallacy है. So हमें क्या करना चाहिए? Every time you see something that appears interesting on the face of it, take a moment and verify it. There are tons of sources which will tell you whether that's correct or whether that's not correct. And you're living in times wherein these social networking platforms are making people available. It's so easy to access somebody, reach out to somebody. You can email and check for yourself whether this is something that really happened. For example, if you want to check something about COVID right now, there's a very popular person, immunologist, and a very massively followed doctor on Twitter. So you can message and email him and he'll reply. He'll respond to your queries. So you really don't have to rely on the alternative news houses also to check whether a particular news is correct. You can go to the source, you can go to the exact source. And when you're looking at a particular incident being reported by somebody, see what the relevance of that particular source is. अगर किसी को कोट किया जा रहा है, किसी इंसान ने कोई बात की, वो कितनी अथॉरिटी रखता है उस चीज पे बात करने के लिए, वो हमें एस्टिमेट करने की जरूरत है, वो हमें वेह करने की जरूरत है, whether that person really holds an authority over an issue or not. And if he or she holds an authority, then obviously you can go ahead and read the story further. And then who else is being quoted? For example, if there's a story on, let's say, some incident happened wherein police and the other side is involved, are both parties talked to? Are both the versions included in the story? So that needs to be ascertained. कई बार because the story needs to be filed, क्योंकि deadline है, क्योंकि फिर अगर किसी और ने story कर दिया, आपकी story उतना ज़्यादा important नहीं रहेगा, तो आप जल्दी में story post कर देते हैं या फिर file हो जाती है story, तो उसके बाद वो update होती रहती है, उसमें बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें add होती जाएंगी जो पहले draft में नहीं होती. So वो चीजें भी आपने analyze करना है. Where did the update take place? कहाँ पे इसमें शायद कमी थी जो अब इन्होंने करेक्ट कर दी. So, काफी चीजें हैं जो हम खुद अपनी लेवल पे काउंटर कर सकते हैं.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
ma'am. Ulvi, I hope you have got your answer. So
Yeah.
okay, so we have got one very important question popping up on Facebook, but before that, we have our colleague Anna Mitra who wants to ask a question. Anna Mitra, if you're there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Ma'am, my question is that, the media industry is kind of perceived to be slightly away from the people who are outside the media industry. That is the common perception, because as people who are outside the media industry, we tend to believe what we see and what we hear. So considering that, there's a lot of false propaganda and fake news that is circulating worldwide. And also there's a difference in the narrative of the news, which is being shared by the local news agency within a country and the international news agency outside. And taking right now that the media is the fourth pillar of the democracy, how do you think we should include the role of media, or maybe the media studies, in the primary levels of the education, or maybe in the secondary levels of education, which can again help in leveraging the future youth building movement of the country?
I think this is a significant area of deliberation. Where do audiences or where do masses exist in this entire process of communication? If you go back to 1920s and the beginning of the mass media formats, एक जो हम पढ़ते हैं एज स्टूडेंट्स, जो हम थियोरी को देखते हैं, एक थियोरी था उस जमाने में जिसको हाइपोडर्मिक थियोरी कहा जाता था. फॉर दैट एरा जी, ऑडियंस जो है, whatever you inject them with, whatever version of reality, whatever piece of information you provide with them, they'll just go on believing it. They'll be narcotized into believing whatever you provide them with. So there the concept of passive audience was really huge. But then over a period of time, with the advent of different media formats, you see the role of audiences have shifted to a large extent, and now it's being said that they play more of an active role. But जब आप इसको evaluate करते हैं, and when you look at the media landscape and see where audiences actually exist, do they really have that much of an importance? I would say yes, to some extent. You take the example of news channels. Which news channels are leading? And then you have the idea of TRPs and these ratings. We're not really going into discussing whether they are authentic and how can they be authentic in the first place. हम उसकी बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, लेकिन जो पॉपुलैरिटी है या जो फॉलोइंग है, अगर आप इनमें से ही जो भी आपके पास चैनल्स हैं, अगर आप देखें किन चीजों के मास फॉलोइंग होते हैं, लोग क्या चीज फॉलो करना पसंद करते हैं, वो भी एक इंडिकेटर होता है अबाउट द काइंड ऑफ कंटेंट ऑडियंसेस आर इंटरेस्टेड इन. Right? And when a particular channel or a particular genre of media, whether that's news or entertainment, like for example films, when they understand the kind of content that people are following, they generally they jump onto that bandwagon, and they follow the same kind of content production, and it happens to an extent wherein there is saturation या फिर एक fatigue आ जाता है audiences में भी, or filmmakers या content producers में भी. Eventually they'll shift to the content which is now being followed by the audiences. See, now look at the Twitter, for example. Look at the kind of trends that you have on daily basis. I think it's a very interesting area of research also. I keep following it. I keep looking at that. So if you look at the kind of trends which are available on Twitter, चाहे आप रीजन की बात करें, चाहे आप कंट्री की बात करें, या फिर आप ग्लोबल ट्रेंड्स को अगर आप फॉलो करेंगे, वो जो ट्रेंड्स है वो आपको बताता है. वो जो ट्रेंड्स हैं, चले उसमें बॉट्स की, हम ट्विटर बॉट्स की भी आप बात साइड में रख लें, बट जनरली आप देखोगे कि मोर और लेस देयर इज अ पार्टिसिपेशन ऑफ ट्विटर यूजर्स, फॉर कॉमनर्स, फॉर कॉमन सिटीजंस, फॉर ordinary people, and they like to talk about some issue. For them, for example, Sushant was really important during COVID, or whether deaths were happening, या फिर ऑक्सीजन का क्या सिनारियो था, या फिर हॉस्पिटल्स का क्या सिनारियो था. उससे बढ़ के शायद Sushant was really important to them. Or usse pehle, when a particular community was targeted for spreading COVID, so that again became a very important story. Or at the time of a sports event या एक cricket match के दौरान, वो अचानक से बहुत important हो जाता है. So when audiences and when people start talking about an issue, it becomes an agenda. एक theory है agenda setting करके, वो ये बोलती है जी, when media talk about something, it tells audiences that this is the most important event that you really need to talk about. This is the issue that you need to focus on. बाकी सारे issues उतने prominent नहीं है, but जो हम आपको, या अगर आप बुलेटिन की बात करेंगे, एक न्यूज बुलेटिन होता है, या आप न्यूज़पेपर की बात करें, उसमें जो ऑर्डर होता है या सीक्वेंस होता है, वो अकॉर्ड करता है इंपॉर्टेंस टू दोज इवेंट्स. व्हाट कम्स एट नंबर 1, व्हाट इज सेकंड मोस्ट इवेंट, सेकंड मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट इवेंट, एंड देन सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ. या न्यूज़पेपर, व्हिच इज द टॉप स्टोरी अकॉर्डिंग टू द न्यूज़पेपर. और फिर जो इनसाइड पेजेस में स्टोरी दब के रह जाती है, कई बार आपके हिसाब से शायद वो इंपॉर्टेंट है, लेकिन वो आपको बता रहे हैं ये इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है क्योंकि ये फ्रंट पेज स्टोरी नहीं है. एंड देन विद टाइम ग्रेजुअली वी स्टार्ट बिलीविंग देयर वर्जन ऑफ इंपॉर्टेंस एंड एजेंडा. सो ये थियोरी बताती है जो मीडिया एजेंडा है वो पब्लिक एजेंडा बन जाता है, बिकम्स पब्लिक एजेंडा. एंड नाउ हैविंग टॉक्ड अबाउट दिस irony of the sorts कि एक साइड से आप ट्रेंड भी करें, एक साइड से आप फॉलो करें, एक साइड से आप एक पर्टिकुलर कंटेंट को फॉलो कर रहे हैं, और दूसरी साइड से मीडिया आपको बता रहा है क्या देखना है क्या नहीं देखना है. उस टाइम पे आपकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी आती है व्हेन सोशल मीडिया और न्यू मीडिया प्रोवाइड्स यू विद द एस्पेक्ट ऑफ इंटरएक्टिविटी. व्हाई वेब 2.0 became really significant was because of this added advantage of interactivity. How is that being used? Is that being used? If you see some of the stories, some of the posts in which there's a story about some accident or some killing, for example Christchurch killing jo hua tha, and if you look at the reactions of audiences, there are hundreds of comments which are celebrating, there are hundreds of reactions which signify the sadism of people towards a particular incident, and it happens across the spectrum. ये नहीं है कि उनके वाले ऐसे कर रहे हैं या इनके वाले ऐसे नहीं कर रहे हैं, सब फॉलो कर रहे हैं ये सारी चीज. If you look at if you follow some of these stories on YouTube, if you follow them on any of these websites wherein there is a chance for comment, what kind of comments are available, what are people talking about? So audience फिर eventually ये ना समझे कि nothing is up to us, we are not powerful at all. Whatever power lies with us as audiences also, we're not making use of that correctly as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for the very bright answer. So we have one important question popping up on Facebook. Media ethics की बात हम करते हैं, तो media ethics को लेके एक बहुत important question है. So it's Sheikh Arshad जो पूछ रहे हैं. In this era of media education must have flourished, but unfortunately it has ethical decline more and more. So suggest a feature to come out of this.
Every era will have challenges when it comes to ethics, and I think it holds true for different fields also. कई बार जब when a story about some मेडिकल प्रोसेसेस इन्वॉल्व या हेल्थ केयर के बारे में एक स्टोरी आ रही है या एक इंसिडेंट हुआ है, पीपल विल स्टार्ट क्वेश्चनिंग द एथिक्स ऑफ द मेडिकल प्रैक्टिशनर्स देयर आल्सो. सेम विल हैपन विद जर्नलिज्म या मीडिया एज वेल, एंड इट राइटली सो, बिकॉज यस, एथिक्स का एक बहुत बड़ा दखल होता है. एक होता है आपका जी पर्सनल एथिक, दूसरा है आपका प्रोफेशनल एथिक. आप प्रोफेशनल एथिक के साथ कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं कर सकते हैं, बिकॉज जो इंग्रेडिएंट्स हैं जो न्यूज को बनाते हैं, जो तरतीब देते हैं न्यूज को, जो आपको हेल्प करते हैं इन writing a story, in filing a story, or even in reporting and researching for a story, they are heavily based on ethical considerations. And eventually कोशिश आप अगर देखेंगे, जो मैंने लेगेसी मीडिया फॉर्म्स की बात की या मैंने न्यूज़पेपर्स की बात की, they do follow ethics to some extent, wherein they think that ये लार्जर पिक्चर के साथ, लार्जर पिक्चर जो उस इंसिडेंट का या फैक्चुअल जो उसका प्रेजेंस है उसके साथ ज्यादा हार्म नहीं कर रहा, तो वो उस चीज को फॉलो करते हैं. लेकिन there are problems with the way this field operates. If you look at the industry here in Kashmir, a big factor for generating revenue for any media industry is your advertising. And our kind of model is so bad when it comes to advertising. आपके पास प्राइवेट सेक्टर नहीं है, आपके पास बड़े बड़े इंडस्ट्रीज नहीं हैं जो आपको एड्स दें या फिर आपके रेवेन्यू में आपको हेल्प कर पाए. आपका सर्कुलेशन कुछ हजार तक है, उसके अलावा नहीं जाएगा कभी भी. सो where from will you generate the revenue? So वो sustain नहीं कर पाते हैं. So if some media house is doing really well, they have issues with vis-a-vis sustainability and existential crisis हो जाते हैं उस institution के लिए, because उसको नहीं पता कि मैं कैसे ये न्यूज को आगे चलाऊं. अब ये जो ethics की बात है, बहुत सारे ethics आपको कोड्स बहुत पढ़ाए जाते हैं स्कूल्स में, जो जर्नलिज्म स्कूल्स हैं उसमें हर एक मीडिया फॉर्मेट के हिसाब से फिल्मों के अलग कोड्स हैं, कोड ऑफ एथिक्स हैं, पीआर पब्लिक रिलेशंस के अलग कोड ऑफ एथिक्स हैं, एडवर्टाइजिंग के हैं या फिर न्यूज के हैं. सो ऑल ऑफ दीज आर देयर एंड लार्जली दे विल ट्राई टू काइंड ऑफ स्टिक टू देम. बट again, जो what is happening in the field becomes slightly paradoxical for a journalist in terms of uski, for example, he wants to follow a particular version of the story and he really does not want to compromise with it. वो story kill होगी, वो story कभी file ही नहीं होगी. Yeah, a lot of people who are reporting for, let's say, national media houses or some other big media houses, they send a story जिसमें एक particular incident को एक तरह से define किया गया है, कुछ terms use किए गए हैं to maybe profile a person, profile a group of individuals, उनको एक तरह से डिफाइन किया जाता है. So आपने जब वो स्टोरी फाइल की, वो एडिटर या आपका जो डेस्क पे बैठा एडिटर है, वो उसमें से कुछ वर्ड्स चेंज कर लेता है. So जब वो फाइनल स्टोरी छप के आती है, at times the journalist himself is slightly shocked to see a new version of the story was introduced, या एक नया word introduce किया गया जिसकी वजह से मेरी स्टोरी पूरा बदल ही गई. So बहुत चीजों, बहुत लेवल्स पे इश्यूज हैं, या फिर इवन एट द हाईएस्ट लेवल ऑफ एन इंस्टीट्यूशन, एट टाइम्स the political economy of media also plays a major role. It's not just the level of a journalist, but it's also at the highest level, wherein some kind of intervention, some kind of influence might come into play, and a story might not be carried, it might be killed altogether, not even given a chance to change the version, but वो पूरी तरह से kill ही हो जाएगी. लेकिन फिर again जो ethics की बात है, वो भी again I'll go back to the audiences only. जब आपने देखा, फॉर एग्जाम्पल कोविड के दौरान आपने देखा कि बहुत सारे कॉन्स्पिरेसी थियरी सर्कुलेट हुए. राइट फ्रॉम द टाइम वुहान के बारे में ये बताया गया कि वहां पे पेशेंट 0 डिटेक्ट हुआ, और फिर व्हेन इट स्प्रेड टू अदर प्लेसेस एंड ऑल, सो देयर हैव बीन मल्टीपल conspiracy theories related to religion, related to so many things, migrants and other things. So वो conspiracy theories पैंडेमिक के दौरान, या फिर आप अगर देखेंगे circulation of photographs about domestic wins, या फिर डिप्लोमेसी, विंस इन डिप्लोमेसी, कई सारी गवर्नमेंट्स ऐसे करते रहे हैं. देयर वाज अ वेरी पॉपुलर केस इन 2006 इन इजिप्ट, जहां पे उन्होंने क्या किया, जो उनका लीडर था उसके इर्द गिर्द वर्ल्ड लीडर्स को दिखाया गया, जो कि एक मॉर्फ फोटोग्राफ था. द पर्सन वाज नॉट एक्चुअली इन सेंटर, वो साइड से था. सो सिंपल, एक बहुत आपको ये हार्मलेस एक मॉर्फिंग लगेगा, बट ऑब्वियसली दिस वाज सम काइंड ऑफ फेक न्यूज ऑफ द सॉर्ट्स तकरीबन 15 साल पहले. सो जब आप ये सारी चीजें देख रहे हैं और ये कंसिस्टेंटली हो रही हैं, यू आर गेटिंग अवेयर ऑफ व्हाट इज हैपनिंग. एक थियोरी है जिसको इनोकुलाइजेशन थियोरी कहा जाता है. इट्स लाइक इम्यूनाइजेशन. जैसे हम आजकल कोविड से बचने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, इम्यूनिटी डेवलप कर रहे हैं. इट सेज दैट ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम व्हेन यू कंज्यूम द सेम काइंड ऑफ डेट्रीमेंटल और हार्मफुल कंटेंट, आपकी एक इम्यूनिटी डेवलप हो जाती है विद टाइम, एंड यू आर एबल टू आइडेंटिफाई दैट अटैक ऑन, let's say, truth, identify that attack, or let's say your faith. So you are able to detect, oh, this is Islamophobia, for example, or you're able to detect that this is misogynistic. So जब ये over a period of time हो रहा है और आप उसको अच्छे से follow भी कर रहे हैं, आप भी ये चीजें question कर सकते हैं, या फिर एक एक subconsciously आप वो एक reasoning develop कर पाएंगे, जहाँ पे आप understand कर सकते हैं whether the ethics are upheld or they have been compromised to some extent.
थैंक यू सो मच मैम. तो जैसे पहले भी बोला था कि 1 hour is never going to be enough for this session. So with this, I would like to ask Akil to present vote of thanks. Though we have a lot of questions which remained unanswered, so we'll try to connect it to you via email, or we'll try to connect one more session with you regarding the same topic. So Akil, over to you, please.
Thank you, Tanveer, for hosting this important conversation today. It was a significant and a telling session, and I believe we all have something that we are meant to contribute to improve and promote the public's media literacy. On behalf of the Jammu Kashmir Policy Institute and on my own behalf, I would like to thank Dr. Munisa Qadri for answering the important questions on media literacy education and adding information to the little information that people had about the topic. Thanks for conducting a very in-depth evaluation of questions in a sound and comprehensive manner. I believe that more discussions are required to bring more awareness to this important topic. We are looking forward to seeing you very soon with a new session of the Expert Talk series. That's all for now in the Expert Talk series. More to come in the coming week. Thank you and good night.